Broadcast Center. This is a special Your Local Election Headquarters edition of 22 News Online.
Good evening and welcome to this digital election special of 22 News. The polls have just closed across western Massachusetts, so we're going to bring you updates on the races throughout the next hour here. But joining me here tonight is political consultants Tony Signoli and Paul Robbins. They're going to be with us throughout the night to kind of analyze the races, the ballot questions, the results, and their impact. So I want to thank both of you for being here tonight.
Sure,
I know you guys have been
thank
researching
you.
this and watching and all of that. So we're going to delve right into this. 4 Western Massachusetts communities voted for mayor tonight. So we're going to begin with discussing the actual elections here. So let's kind of delve right into all of this. Let's go with Springfield mayor between incumbent Dominic Sarno and challenger Yolanda Consells. Now, Mayor Sarno has served as mayor for 11 years now and is running for another 4-year term in office. His challenger, Yolanda Consells, is a former police officer and community activist. She has run unsuccessfully for city council in the past. So we want to look at the numbers that are coming in so far, and this is not happening in Springfield just yet. But we do want to kind of delve into this and see what are your thoughts so far on this. I think a lot of people automatically know that Sarno is going to be the winner, or presumed to be the winner. We actually had a debate here at 22 News. He didn't show up, she did. What do you think, Paul?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say the mayor's going to win. I think you can do the projection. Look, he is a very popular mayor. Under his administration, you just look at Springfield. You know, I think it's pretty clear that Springfield's in a renaissance now from an economic development point of view in so many ways. So the downtown is getting attention. The riverfront's their next, thing on the horizon. He's done a great job. People love him. He's America's mayor. I think this is more of a victory lap for him. Stop, smell the roses, and be happy that people are going to appreciate him. I think we're going to find out shortly.
And Tony, is that what voters are looking at? He mentioned, Riverfront Park, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is happening in the city, MGM, economic development.
That's the unique thing about Dom Sarno. There's the big stuff, like Paul just mentioned, and CCRC and all the rest. But then he's out there in every one of those neighborhoods. They know who he is in 16 Acres, in Pine Point. I've been to events in Mason Square, and it's astonishing to see the support that he gets from folks of color, the support that he's got from Ward 1 to 16 Acres. He's got that. He's got this gigantic, it's almost this feel-good thing. The mayor shows up, and you think it's like the mayor of Chicago or New York or something, and he does the job. He's a 24/7 kind of guy. Ton of energy.
It's always interesting, like when you go to an event, like how many people he's going to know in
It's
the
like
room. He knows everybody.
And he's always, exactly. He's going to ask, how's your mom, how's your dad?
With that
by
being
name.
said, why does someone want to challenge him?
It's a democracy. It's a big city. Not everybody's going to be happy with everything. So, people are going to run. And a lot of times in a race like this, it's somebody who hasn't run before for a big office. So it happens, and they perfectly, have the right to do that. But I don't think it's, I think people are really happy. His name recognition, his favorability is really high.
Yeah.
So I think that does happen.
Yeah, we'll watch the numbers. Meantime, we did have a series of mayoral debates here at 22 News. The first one was Springfield mayoral race. That was Yolanda Consells. She did take part. He didn't take part. They talked about a variety, we talked about a variety of issues with her, including education, the management of the police department, also gun violence.
We see it even just recently in the North End. We have to be more proactive. And not only that, we need to start educating all ages on gun safety training. We have to do that because we have to be more proactive.
All right, so I want to move forward now and talk a little bit more here. Let's go into the mayoral race in Chicopee. We have a new mayor after tonight for Chicopee. Mayor Richard Koss is not running for another 2-year term for office, so that leaves the mayor's seat open for the first time since Koss left office, for the first time back in 2003. We have a look at the numbers here. I believe we can take that now. And running to replace him, former police officer and school administrator Joe Morissette, and City Council President John View. In the September primaries, View beat Morissette with 45% of the votes. It was the first preliminary election for mayor in Chicopee since there was a special election in 1997. So what are your thoughts here? The numbers are there on your screen with just about 25% of the precincts reporting here, and it looks like View at this point is ahead.
You know, it's really rare for someone who won the primary not to win the general. It usually plays out. The proportions are generally the same. So it looks like that's what may be happening here. And talk about a popular mayor. I mean, Richard Koss was a very popular mayor also. And I think by extension, the president of the council probably benefited from that because I think Chicopee's headed in the right direction. I think people feel that way. And they have a great state representative in Joe Wagner, in the legislature as part of leadership. So generally those things, unless something happened, some issue dropped, some October surprise, which I don't think.
And I'm actually just being told that View is being called the official winner. We got the check mark right next to his
That makes
picture.
it official.
So it is official there, with 53% of the vote there for him, 47 for Morissette. What are your thoughts?
You know, it's interesting too because you're right. City Council President View and Mayor Koss working together. There was not the rancor that you had seen in the past with some other mayors. So it was a good team in that regard. The other thing too is Paul touched on it, you know, the popularity of Richard Koss, the popularity of Joe Wagner, and they both endorsed View. So the electorate looks at that and they're saying, okay, here's the guy that I've liked for a while, Koss, liked him twice, brought him back after he was out for a while. And then Joe Wagner is, you know, a very powerful player in Chicopee. Folks throughout Chicopee love him, and they know this is a major player in the legislature. He's going to have a great relationship with this mayor, and they look at that sometimes, I think, an electorate to say, this new mayor is going to be able to not have to be a freshman, so to speak. He's going to have the tutelage and the mentorship and the partnership with someone like Joe Wagner to get things done.
And both of these candidates discussed a number of issues during our debate here at 22 News, discussing public safety, the opioid crisis as well, trash collection in the city, and funding for education.
We're losing teachers. In the last 2 years, we've lost about 100 teachers, paraprofessionals, and administrators to other districts. And again, some people will tell you that a new person coming in gives you fresh ideas. I would disagree.
Funding our future is what it's all about. We've been underfunded and shortchanged for far too long. We're a gateway community, and we're not a wealthy community.
So what are other thoughts on this?
Well, one of the things I find interesting, they brought up education, and as a lot of folks may know, that the legislature just passed a landmark piece of legislation, essentially to spend billions of dollars in Massachusetts. So how those monies are going to be spent are going to be really crucially important for places like Chicopee, Holyoke, Springfield.
And you? What do you think?
When you've got somebody like Wagner as the state representative, who's got the seniority that he does. I mean, sometimes we even joke when we introduce him at something, here's the Speaker of the Western Massachusetts House of Representatives. He's the guy that so often, speaker after speaker, has gone to get things done. So you would be thinking for sure that he's going to be able to bring a good chunk of that money back to Chicopee, and that's the kind of a relationship we'll have with this new mayor and its city council and school committee.
Okay. All right, so our election special will continue with up-to-the-minute results and election results breakdown as well. We're back with more discussion of tonight's races. You're watching 22 News. We are back here tonight, our digital first election special here on wwlp.com, also on your 22 News mobile device, and we are calling this race right here for Chicopee Mayor. You can see John View is ahead. We got the check mark right next to his picture with 53% of the vote here tonight. So we are continuing our discussion on the mayoral races here in Western Massachusetts. We want to talk about Westfield, another Western Massachusetts city that will have a new mayor. Incumbent mayor Brian Sullivan is not running for a third two-year term. Sullivan is actually leaving office 2 months early after accepting a position with Governor Charlie Baker's administration. The city council president, Ralph Figge, will serve as acting mayor until the winner of tonight's election is inaugurated on January 7th. Now, running to replace Sullivan are State Senator Don Humison and Westfield Police Captain Michael McCabe. A very interesting race that's expected to be close. And look at this right here. You can see that Humison is ahead with 53. And we understand that McCabe has actually contacted Humison and congratulated him on these numbers, but has not formally said you have won at this point. So we're still kind of to wait and see there. What are your
just for
thoughts
people watching,
Yeah.
and Tony knows this, it looks like the numbers are so small, how could you have a victor? But essentially both campaigns get the vote as it's being reported at each precinct. They call it back, so you have folks in their headquarters taking the calls, so they know before we do officially.
Okay.
But I think
Because when you look at that,
Like,
that
like
graphic
how-
right there,
right.
we're like,
Right.
what's going on right
but
there?
the folks who are in
Yeah.
the campaign headquarters probably have 80 or
and then
90%.
and you look at it right now.
Right, so
I
there-
mean,
so there you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, that looks awful close right there.
I know. So, but
So
once
if,
again,
if Humminson were to win, I
Okay.
think, Tony, you would agree with this. I think the big question was he's a very well appreciated and liked state legislator. So the question is, do we want to have him as our mayor? We'd like to keep him in the legislature because he's doing such a great job.
I think it was one of you brought up before when we were just kind of debriefing before the show that could work in his favor
Right.
or could work against
Right,
him.
someone could say, hey, why don't we keep him
Dual-edged
there?
sword.
Right.
Yeah, definitely a dual-edged sword, without a doubt. There's a lot of Republicans who like him a lot. He's one of the lone Republican senators in the Massachusetts State Senate. So certainly that would be on their mind. And you lose someone with seniority in the Senate, you're hoping that you're going to find someone to replace him who's going to have that kind of impact there. I think that's the other piece of this too, is that what you'll see now, if Humison is victorious, he cannot serve as state senator and mayor. So he writes a letter of resignation at some point, or he, on January 7th, steps out of the Senate. A special election would be called. The Senate president jumps into this, the Secretary of State, and then right away you've got that race going on too.
I'm sorry, there's
Sure,
another
please.
dynamic which you know.
Yeah.
So John Vilas, who's the state representative
Exactly.
there, announced last year whether
Yeah.
Humison were to win or lose,
March,
that he was going to run
Yeah.
for state senate. So I can guarantee you, everybody that likes John Vilas voted for Don Humison.
Okay.
That is another thing that's under
Okay.
the surface tonight that could be the difference in a race like this.
And we talked about how we were looking at those numbers and how close they were, 50%, right? So what I'm being told too is that we're still waiting on absentee ballots, so that's why he hasn't
okay.
conceded
So
yet.
this really could
so
be-
it is close,
Yeah, yeah.
right? I mean, that's
very, very,
considered
very close.
close.
Yeah.
Once again, we had them here for a 22 News debate, and the candidates discussed a variety of topics, including how to deal with PFAS water contamination, how to attract more business to the city, how to deal with potholes and other roadway issues in Westfield.
In part of the city. As mayor, what would you do to improve?
What we really need to do is prioritize how we do the work. So we should do the work by addressing our stormwater runoff. We should do the work by addressing our drainage systems from that water runoff.
I think what you do is you make a plan. You sit down with DPW, you sit down with the counselors, because it has to be an issue that's addressed not just in the center core of the city, but also in the residential neighborhoods.
Opinion right there.
So how soon would the special election actually be called if Humison does win?
It's literally a call of the Secretary of State, to figure out what he wants to do. You would hope that the seat would not be left open for a long time.
Is there a
Because people-
protocol there? Like, how does that work?
Well, I think what the Secretary will think of on here is that he will want to get this done as soon as possible, so there's not a seat that doesn't have a voice. That's key with Bill Galvin. If you look at his historical decisions on this. It's as quickly as is possible. On his mind will be something else, though, too. How do I save those 10 cities and towns in that Senate district some money? So do I have a primary early with the general election being perhaps on Super Tuesday so that folks are coming out one time? So those small cities and towns don't incur a large expense for that race. So I think you'll see this done probably by Super Tuesday, a general no later than that.
Okay. And if this does become so close, what happens then? I mean, we're at reach a point. How does it work here?
Well, I mean,
like once again, I'm not from this area.
Yeah, right. Well, you know,
how does that work?
Yeah, we've been through recounts, which are painful. They don't generally change the result, but I mean, I was involved in a race a few years ago. There were 128,000 votes cast in Hampden County, and the difference was 288 votes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the candidate decided not to do a recount. Really hard to change those votes, but we go back far enough that a lot of these votes have been, in Chicopee, for instance, they were paper ballots. You know, the DA's race that we were both involved in required that. Let's see what happens with the absentee. But if it's that close tonight, I don't think you can declare a winner.
Okay. Yeah. The last Western Massachusetts city has a contested mayoral race in Greenfield. So we have incumbent Mayor William Martin not running for re-election there. City Councilor Sheila Gilmore and former Greenfield Planning Board Chair Roxanne Wiedegartner are on the ballot this year following a preliminary election back in September. But a third candidate, we have Brickett Alice, who came in third place in the primary, is running as a write-in candidate. So first of all, how often does that happen, a write-in candidate?
Rarely, although I have a very good friend of mine who lives in Georgia and tells me every 4 years he writes me in for president.
How's that working out
Guy
for
from
you?
the neighborhood. It's true.
I love it.
So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I don't remember who won the preliminary, but generally, going back to what I said earlier, the person that won the preliminary generally comes through. You know, it may mean that people are just, I think you agree, Tony, dissatisfied with what the candidates are being presented. I think we see some of that right now, actually, in the national. So, you know, it wasn't too long ago that a write-in candidate won a state Senate seat representing Hampshire County, which was really hard to do.
Making this one a little bit interesting, too, in Greenfield is that they have a voting machine that's broken. So there's going to be, we already understand there's going to be a delay in getting numbers from them. So it could be a while. I heard someone in the newsroom say 1 o'clock in the morning before we could find out any real numbers from them. So that's something to keep in mind as we chug along here with our election coverage. They were here as well for a debate here in the studio. They addressed a variety of topics, including the controversial Safe City Ordinance. Let's listen in.
I believe that we shouldn't be drawing attention to the city because we can't stop ICE from doing what they're going to do.
Our police department has plenty to do in Greenfield. We don't need to be doing the federal government's work.
So there you have that. It's interesting to hear those national issues being brought down to such a local level, specifically on immigration. I don't know how you win on that topic. Do you win on that topic?
Unless you do some really good polling, you know where people are. I think people try to appeal to who they perceive their constituency is. So if you have a constituency that is progressive, you're going to make the assumption people are going to agree with you. The police shouldn't be involved in this national issue having to do with immigration. But it's risky because it can cut both ways. And if all the candidates have the same position, that's one thing. But if they have a different position.
And it seemed like in this case, too, that these candidates, I watched that debate, and it seemed like these candidates were kind of trying to stay down the middle of this.
Yeah, they were playing safe.
Not offend anybody, right?
Not offend anyone, and saying, why do we need to make a declaration? But just have it be done and not draw attention.
Tip O'Neill famously said all politics are local. So you're going to get elected on the school system, the potholes, the police, fire, public safety.
Snow removal.
Yeah, snow removal. You don't want to go down that road and lose because you took a national issue and took it too far on the local level.
Interesting. Okay, so one of the interesting trends that we've seen, and you kind of touched on this, and I think it's interesting, this year in Massachusetts, mayoral races using use of super PAC funding for candidates. So these PACs usually only get involved in the national races, major state races, for example, different seats like that. But this year, a Republican super PAC has spent thousands on mayoral races. And according to the Boston Globe, a super PAC with close ties to Governor Charlie Baker gave nearly $14,000 to Mayor Dominic Sarno, who crossed party lines to endorse Baker in his 2018 re-election. So yeah, let's talk about this. Why are these super PACs spending so much money on such a local level?
I think what's happening is they're developing the farm system. Most of the action now with the super PACs are Senate, presidential campaigns, members of Congress. This is a way to infiltrate into a state and start to develop the candidates that you want to eventually percolate up to state offices and into the Congress.
This is the long game.
This is the long game, absolutely the long
yeah.
game. So we have in Massachusetts a group called Mass Fiscal Alliance, which has essentially been attacking members of the Democratic House in their campaign. So I know a couple, Brian Ash and Angelo Pupolo, local state representatives,
Mike Finn,
who were all attacked with serious dollars, questioning their record. And that's Koch money. That's the Koch brothers' money. So it's really a new development, I'd say, in the last 5 years, but even more in the last couple of years. And now you're mentioning that Governor Baker set up a super PAC. So what we're seeing on the national level is starting to percolate down to the local.
What does this do to the average voter out there, though, Tony? I mean, because it just seems like there's so much more work on the voter now than there ever was before. They need to make sure they're researching everything.
It's up to the voter to be intelligent about what they're doing with their vote. It's up to them to find out what's real or what's not. What really is important here is local news coverage, local news media, again, who will more so cut to the chase of what's happening in these local campaigns, will report it more so. Investigative reporting. We've never needed that genre more than we do now. It's not all up to us who can go on social media, who can spin it, who can do the digital media. It can still be won on the local level, and it's important, for a lot of these candidates to make sure they're able to get their message out and to do it with a wise advertising campaign, without a doubt. It's not just all Facebook. It's powerful, Facebook. Google's powerful. All the social media outlets are amazing. But it's still key to do a lot of the old-fashioned basics that you have to do in a campaign. So what can we do? You just got to really, really, really work hard to make sure that you're supporting and voting for the right person, and not being, as Paul's brought up, that's an amazing thing. Fiscal Alliance is the Koch brothers. And my gosh, they're trying to have a say in who my state representative is, who's my state senator is. That's amazing. That's like hijacking my legislator, They haven't had a lot of success so far in Massachusetts, but spending a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I mean, we can talk maybe about this a little bit later on, but, are there different states where they're spending more money than others? I think of Massachusetts being one that they probably wouldn't spend as much money.
Not to get into what's happening right now in the presidential campaign, but nationally Trump is behind, but in the battleground states he's even. And the reason he's even is in just 30 days in May, he spent $5 million on social media in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. So that's happening while we're not seeing it.
Right.
And, we remember when all of our advertising dollars went on to wwlp TV. Now we have to split it, obviously, with the digital presence also.
It is interesting. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage here. Our election special will continue with a look at the races for Springfield City Council. You're watching 22 News. We're back here tonight with our digital election special here on wwlp.com, also your 22 News mobile app, and we have our political consultants joining us here. We have Tony Signoli and Paul Robbins, all here to discuss tonight's election results. I want to thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Just the analysis and insight is really helpful. So we want to continue our discussion tonight. Now we want to head to the Springfield City Council elections. 4 out of the 5 incumbent city councilors at large. Justin Hurst, Jesse Letterman. Also, we have Cateri Walsh and Tracy Whitfield, all running for re-election this year. City Council at large, Tim Ryan is running for council in Ward 6, a seat that is becoming vacant. So there's going to be at least one new city council at large in Springfield following tonight's election. 10 candidates on the ballot for 5 seats. What are your predictions here?
I think the real interesting storyline here tonight is Chris Poner, who was a retired fireman, in his social media posts made some racially charged statements that came to light. And he performed very well in the preliminary, so it was a question whether might he unseat one of the incumbents. That's what I would look at tonight to see if his numbers went backwards or whether he's threatening one of the incumbents. My sense is the incumbents will hold. I don't know, Tony.
Yeah, what do you think, Tony?
My gut's the same. The incumbents will hold. They did well in the primary. They've been very active. These are some of the hardest working folks that we've seen on the city council in years. Though Jesse Letterman is relatively new, it's like this is all he does. All constant. He's like a Boston city councilor. Cateri Walsh has been around for a long time, a proven name. Justin Hurst, city council president. Tracy Whitfield, new, filling the vacancy that was left behind by Tom Ash. But again, another powerhouse, really out there working hard. So who is it that comes up and takes that seat being vacated by Tim Ryan? I think it's a little bit of jump ball right now. You've got Sean Curran, former state representative, very well liked, spent a good chunk of change to do this, worked hard in the general. There's the question for Poner. Does he retain the votes that he had in the primary?
And Kelly.
Kelly Moriarty Finn, and who was endorsed in the last 48 hours by Richie Neal.
Right.
I think that has an impact in the city of Springfield. I agree, Paul. In places like Ward 6 and Ward 7 and Ward 2, Neal, a lot of impact.
She could be the beneficiary of this issue with Chris Poner,
Yeah.
and she's a newcomer, and she would fit that last seat.
Now, the city council seems to, like I've said, I've been here a short time, but I've learned in this short time that I've been here is that the city council seems to be at odds with the mayor on a number of issues.
I think you could put that jump ball in any city.
Anywhere.
You're right.
It's
so true. Where I come
get
from,
that.
same thing.
Yeah,
But yeah, there is a bit of a rift there, it seems, with the makeup of this council possibly changing here. What do you think?
Honestly, I think that's a healthy thing for everybody involved,
Okay.
to have some tension between the two branches. I think it's a good thing. The other thing historically in Springfield, the next mayor a lot of times has come out of the city council. So if you're on the city council in Springfield and you're in a large seat, I guarantee you every single one of them thinks, I might be able to run for mayor someday. So it almost creates a political tension that's a little artificial because they're thinking about that. Now, it's going to be a long time because Dominic Sarno is so popular, but I think that creates some of it, but some of it I think is probably healthy.
And what do you think?
I think the same, and especially in this particular instance, you've got that constant yin and yang, that constant back and forth. You've got 3 or 4 councilors that do see themselves as mayor in the future. Did any of them run against him this time around? No. I mean, the reality of his popularity, the money he's been able to raise. The other part of it, too, is if you run against Dominic Sarno, it's 24 hours a day. It doesn't stop. This is what he does, and does it very, very, very well. I think in this particular case, too, another thing that's unique about Dominic Sarno is that it's amazing. He's about to become, if he is not already, the longest serving mayor in the city's history. And that is astonishing, to hang on to a mayoralty in a city like Springfield with all the challenges that he's had, from the natural disasters like tornadoes to having to pick the right casino player, all these dangerous things for a chief executive to do or to deal with. He's done it well enough that he's about to be the longest serving mayor of
the other
Springfield.
thing, because you're new, you wouldn't know this necessarily.
That's why this is great, because I am learning so much.
He worked in a community organization for a long time. He worked as an aide to a former mayor of Springfield, became a city councilor. So he's done that, the hard work along the way. He hasn't just kind of, airdropped into the community.
So did that afford him, did that allow him to perhaps make more aggressive or something, a little more chance choices, I suppose?
Well,
I think when you brought up the casino. So I know that there was a lot of people for and people against that.
Yeah, I think because of those jobs I mentioned, he literally knows everybody in the city of Springfield
is,
and
yeah.
has a relationship with them.
And we have the numbers here right
Sure.
for you. I mean, so you can see 74% for Sarno right now, and this is with just 6% of the precincts reporting, but he's well ahead at this point. So we'll continue to follow that. We're going to continue our 22 News election digital first coverage here on wwlp.com. We have much more to get to, including Holyoke, Greenfield, East Hampton. There's some ballot questions to talk about. You're watching 22 News. We're back here tonight, digital election special here on wwlp.com, and we want to continue our discussion here tonight on the ballot questions now. Residents in Holyoke, Greenfield, and East Hampton also voted on ballot questions today. We're going to begin with Holyoke, which has 2 questions on the ballot, one binding, one non-binding. Question 1, the binding question, asking residents whether they want to approve a Proposition 2.5 override, which would raise their property taxes in order to build 2 new middle schools. We've been doing stories on this for months now. A yes vote is in favor of the city covering about $57 million of that roughly $133 million that it would cost to build the 2 new schools. Each middle school would have 550 students when they're completed in 3 years. Now, this is one of the most hotly debated questions. What do you think about this? Do you think this is going to pass in Holyoke?
Yeah, this is going to be one of those generational things. So I think anybody over 50 is probably against it. People probably 40 and under who have kids, young kids, are for it. It comes down to a turnout issue. So let's say you have this much support, but you bring all of that support out, and there's this much opposition, but only that much opposition shows up at the polls. The people in favor of it win. Really comes down to turnout. I think it's a steep hill for them to climb, but I know there's been a lot of energy around the folks that want it. So it would not surprise me if it made it, but these things almost never win in Massachusetts.
So a yes vote, the city would be covering $57 million, Tony. I mean, every soundbite,
Proposition 2.5, yeah.
Every
it's tax increase.
Yeah, every soundbite I hear from people when we've done stories on this is that tax increase that makes them nervous in a city like Holyoke.
Well, Paul's right on the generational piece of it, without a doubt. If you don't have children in the schools, you may not be as inclined to want to spend money, this kind of money. The encumbrance of this is the next 30 years for a lot of folks. So if you're not not a homeowner, and you are a homeowner, that's going to make a difference on you too. This is a property.
Say that again. Say that again.
If you're a homeowner, this hits your property taxes.
Right. Okay.
If you don't own a home, you're not paying this piece. So there's that.
But
I
you
think,
are
too, yeah.
with rent.
Sure.
most
Yeah, well,
likely.
there's bits and pieces of that perhaps as well too. But this the homeowner that's actually writing that check.
Okay.
The other piece of this too, it's always easier to get a no vote than it is to get a yes vote. No is always easier than a yes. Yes, you've got to make the case. You've got to prove why this is good, why this is important. And I will say the yes side has done a good job with that. Paul makes a good point too. It's getting out the vote. They've got some very active, very savvy folks who are in favor of this. Rebecca Lisi, others. On the other side, though, they've got the easier case. Geez, do you want this tacked onto your property taxes?
I was a part of probably at the time was the largest 2.5 override in the state in Massachusetts. But it had the mayor at the time, which was Mary Hurley, get behind each of them, and each of the pieces were broken down into, there were like 8 different pieces of it, so people could, see specifically what they were voting for. Okay. But her, political power was behind it. In Holyoke, you've got some division there now because while Alex Morris, I think, is popular, he's also running for Congress, and that has split some people in Holyoke. So it's a little harder shot. It's a high bar to clear. It would be historic news if they did it tonight, and you'd have to say, congratulations to the other side.
There's so many obstacles though for Holyoke right now. The school in receivership, for example. I mean, one would think that might play a role as well. No, or
well, some people could say, well, the state's running the school system. Let's see how that works out.
Okay.
And to their credit, they've gone from proficiency in 3rd grade of reading of 13%, which is incredibly low, up into the low 20s since receivership. So you could make a case that things are moving in the right direction, and that might even push some people away from doing this to say, well, let's see how the state receivership turns out.
And I've actually interviewed the superintendent, the receivership superintendent, and there really is no end in sight for when receivership ends. They don't tell us. They won't tell us that.
No, they don't know, because they want to see these things become institutionalized. People may remember that Springfield was almost in receivership in terms of the control board coming and taking over for about 4 years. The finances of the city of Springfield. So, and there was no clock on that as well.
Okay, very interesting. We have more to talk about. It's a busy night here. So stick around. You're watching 22 News. We're back here tonight, Digital First Election Special here on wwlp.com. We're continuing to look at the ballot questions now. Residents in Greenfield, for example, voted on 2 ballot questions. The first question dealing with whether to appropriate $19.5 million to build a new library. The second question deals with whether to approve the controversial Safe City Ordinance, which would prevent Greenfield police from cooperating with federal immigration officials. I want to start with the library here because we kind of already touched on the immigration aspect there. The library, right now they're in a house for the library. They want to build a larger library. They want a standalone library, a true library. This is going to be difficult. It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, and libraries often lose in these kinds of referendum questions to build a library. You'd think, library's good, why would we want that? But some people can rationalize and make the case that you have the schools, you have the internet. Why do we need to go to a library? People are more mobile in terms of how they get information. I'm pro-library myself, but people coming in and out of libraries has declined over time. That's not necessarily a good thing, but so why would I want to spend it on that? It might be a priority issue. If I'm going to spend money and pay more taxes, wouldn't I want to do it on public safety or something?
And Tony, doesn't it make it difficult too? Because I don't think anyone is against a library, right? So it really comes down to the money here.
What's it going to cost me? That's what a lot of the average voters out there are going to think. And again, you've got to make the case. One of the best cases I've ever seen made for a library, East Springfield, Tim Allen, city councilor.
But it took like 10 years.
Paul, you just took the words out of my I wasn't sure. I was just saying 10 to 12 years, and he kept at it and he kept it. But he made the case. It's a meeting place. It's for seniors.
Right.
It's for your kids. It's where they can
They
come.
kind of reinvented it, didn't they?
That's exactly it.
And a lot of libraries are doing
And that's
that
what you've
too,
got to do to win a library question. And I know that's what they tried to do in Greenfield. The pride thing was the other piece of this too in Greenfield. How can we have a situation where we've got a house for our library? This is terrible. So there's a little bit of the guilting that goes on there too. So I'm interested to see how this one comes out. Yeah.
East Hampton voters are deciding on 4 ballot questions. The first 3 questions are binding. Question 1 and 2 deals with the issue of ranked choice voting, asking residents if they want to implement a ranked choice voting system for the offices of mayor and district city council. I guess, how does ranked choice voting work?
And I'll help you.
We agreed to.
Your turn.
The simplest way that I can say it, and I've dealt with it in Maine, is that the way it works is if no one gets 50% of the vote, what happens is they look at all the folks that are in the race, and they go to the last place finisher. Let's say that person's got 10 points. They take that 10 points and they distribute it across all the others equally. If that puts somebody to 51%, that person won. That's the best explanation I think I can give of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some efficiency there. So why go through a primary and then have to do the same thing over again when if you rank the support, so let's say I was voting for you and Tony didn't make it, sorry, but I had you as the second and there was another person in front of you, they would get my vote.
There's also a cost here too, right?
Right.
It's probably
Absolutely.
cheaper.
Save
Cheaper,
not having
more
a primary.
efficient. Why are we doing this? A lot of times you will see a primary where in Springfield, there, 18 makes the final. If there's a 19th, you have to have a whole primary just to get rid of one person.
Right.
So it kind of makes sense, particularly in local
In
elections.
that regard, it does. The only negative I hear on occasion and whatnot, and I had someone in East Hampton actually say this to me, kind of a classic old player from East Hampton. So if I vote for Joe Muggeratz and he comes in third, and you're going to give that vote to Vinnie Boombots, he said, or Jane Smith. Wait a second, I don't like either one of them. You just took my vote for my guy and you gave it to the other person. That sometimes I didn't know how to respond to that argument, but I guess that's the other side of this, you know?
Yeah. All right. 22 News has the latest election results on air and online at wwlp.com. Our election special. We'll continue with a look at the national politics and the 2020 presidential races. You're watching 22 News.
Did you see anything like 4-year term?
Live from the 22 News Broadcast Center, this is a special Your Local Election Headquarters edition of 22 News Online.
We're back here tonight. I'm joined by political consultant Tony Zignoli and Paul Robbins. And so far we've covered the major races here locally, but let's switch to the national spotlight. Right now there are 17 Democrats. Can you name them all? 17. Can you really?
No.
Okay. I can't. 17 Democrats running for president in 2020. 9 candidates have already dropped out. Currently leading the polls are former Vice President Joe Biden, followed by Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senator Bernie Sanders. Still a lot of campaigning to do. A year to go here until the Democratic Convention, of course, too. What do you think here? I mean, there was also just a new poll by the New York Times and Siena College that talked about electability here. Electability, that's different,
Right.
I think. But yeah, what do you think so far?
So this is really fascinating. So within the same news cycle, we have a poll that comes out that says today that Biden is ahead by 12 points. Warren, Buttigieg, and Harris are all, and Bernie are all above Trump as well, by a significant amount. We have a poll from less than a week ago by the New York Times that finds in the battleground states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, that they're basically tied.
Yeah.
So people will say, how could that happen? So I go back to the last election. So people said that the polling was all off. Clinton was supposed to win. Actually, Clinton won the national election by about the percentage point within the margin of error. She won by about 2 points. She was anywhere from 2 to maybe 5 points, but she lost those battleground states. What's also happening is that Trump, just in May, spent $5 million on social media. So everyone's pulling their hair out on the Democratic side saying, oh my God, these battleground states, this is where we're going to win or lose. How did this happen? How can Biden be ahead in the national but be losing these battleground states? He's got oodles of money, and they're still fighting each other to get to the point where they can take him on. So there's a cost to that, especially when the other side is carpet bombing you in those, which Trump is doing via Facebook. And I was watching a football game the other night.
Absolutely.
He put an ad on that. So they have more money that they can spend. So that's what's happening at the ground level.
So the Democrats have to make a decision here, and it seems to me that it comes down to, at least what I'm hearing now, is electability. So who is the most electable?
On the Democratic side.
On the Democratic side.
That's still the key question there and whatnot. They haven't gotten their chops yet, so to speak. Biden's the known quality. It's kind of like that, geez, that tried and true car that you kind of know, but are you looking for something that's a little bit more, higher tech, or, it's going to give you the longer ride or the better ride or whatever. It's a wild game still. It's still so early to prognosticate, but at the same time, we're a year away. For Biden, what I think will start to change now is a significant decision that the campaign made. Larry Raske, friend from Massachusetts, is now heading the Biden super PAC. They've decided, let's go raise it. We can bring that kind of money. That's the only way we're going to beat them. Paul's brought up a great point. Donald Trump, in the last quarter, raised more than all the Democrats combined. He's spent more than all the Democrats combined on social media. You've got to be able to fight that fire with fire, and it looks like Biden's going to say, let's go.
Well, that would be my next question. How do Democrats do that when there are so many Democrats? How do you spend that type of money?
Well, let's just go back on the electability for a second.
Okay.
So Joe Biden is electable, right? Because people like him, his numbers are high. He may have
because they can get some voters too that might be a Republican, but they'll say, you know what, I like him, I don't like Donald Trump anymore.
He's got the likability factor.
Yeah.
I know him. He's like your uncle that you trust.
Yeah.
He puts his foot in his mouth every now and then. People kind of give him a pass on that, given the fact on the other side, the other guy also puts his foot in his mouth probably more frequently.
On purpose often.
On purpose, exactly. Yeah. So I think he's electable. The question really that people are asking, and are starting to be concerned, is Elizabeth Warren electable? Because she looks like she's going to come out of Iowa and New Hampshire with the lead. And then what happens there? So it's interesting that she's done these kind of fireside chats with media outlets. She did a 60 Minutes interview not too long ago with her husband, showing the dog. People are either going to buy it or not buy it. I always say when I was in a campaign, people hate this guy. How could you possibly vote for him? Because he's got to run against somebody else who they may not like just as much. And so if that happens, that's to the advantage of the incumbent.
And with this newest poll that just came out with the New York Times and Siena College, one of the questions they focused in on was likability for Warren. And one of the things that a lot of people said was that she was Hillary Clinton light, or just like Hillary Clinton.
If I'm reading that, if I'm working for her, that concerns me.
Yeah.
And I think the campaign has evolved with her a lot. I think she's evolved a lot from the beginning. In the beginning, it was still a Harvard professor. I'm going to preach this to you. I'm going to tell you how it's got to be and what you've got to do. A little bit of a shade of Michael Dukakis back in the day.
But I will say this. She knows what she believes, and Clinton didn't. If you ask Hillary Clinton,
Bang.
why are you running for president, she would tell you about her resume.
Yeah.
If you ask Elizabeth Warren, she's going to say because the corporate corruption, the corruption of the system, I always say it's primary colors, red, green. You know,
Right.
you have to have a primary color, and people have to know within 30 seconds what you believe. She does do that. The likability issue, they probably can work on.
But she's getting better and better. That's what I'm seeing. Better and better on the stump. These town hall type things, these one-on-one engagements, the 60 Minutes piece. They've got to like you to vote for you. They got to know you to like you. And a lot of people have no idea who she is yet.
But doesn't it also come down to the fact that, you know, Biden, for example, has a tendency to come down the middle to, I don't know, be more conservative on the liberal side.
Sure.
But she comes across as being this fighter, and if you're not that liberal, you're not going to want her.
She's trying to win the primary, which means you have to go as.
So when do you pivot? When do you
pivot? The minute you get the nomination in that speech.
And your supporters and folks in the middle will pivot with you if they like you better than the other candidate.
The question is the 20% in the middle.
Yeah, they'll be angry.
They don't know.
Yeah.
If they're going to
or
buy
even
that
what
pivot.
about the Bernie supporters? Are they going to be those
Are they gonna be
supporters
mad?
that say,
Right.
Are they going to do what they did the last time?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They could.
Probable.
They could
Probable.
because she's
even though Warren's the one, all of her ideas are very good. I wasn't going to say it that way, but you're right. Yeah, they're right along the lines of Bernie's. Yeah.
They're similar.
I think what happened is she feels Bernie's issues actually were hers, and she didn't run 4 years ago. There was a tremendous movement to get her to run because people were concerned about the likability of Hillary Clinton. How odd is that?
Yeah.
And so she withdrew, and Bernie filled that space. So she feels she has the original claim to it.
She's got a great ground campaign, too. Probably the best organized campaign overall
For sure.
is hers, everywhere she is. Yeah.
All right, why don't we hear from all three of those candidates?
Because sometimes there are issues that are bigger than politics, and I think that's the case with this impeachment inquiry.
In my judgment, Trump is the most corrupt president in the history of this country.
My son made a judgment. I'm proud of the judgment he made. I'm proud of what he had to say, and let's focus on this. The fact of the matter is that this is about Trump's corruption. That's what we should be focusing on.
All right, there they are right there. We're going to continue our discussion of the 2020 presidential race right here on 22 News. Stay with us. Good evening once again. President Trump has already been on the campaign trail, but he continues to have to deal with criticism about the impeachment inquiry against him. The first question is, if the president is impeached, can he still run for re-election?
Yes.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
He goes to the Senate.
Yeah.
And just let's explain
Sure.
impeachment, right? So right now we're in the impeachment inquiry. If the House decides to impeach, it doesn't mean he's out of office.
It's an indictment, not a conviction.
Right.
Yes.
It's an indictment. It is all indictment, and it goes to the jury, which is the Senate. The thing that will play out that I think folks are not focusing on is if you're a Republican senator, you're going to have to take a stand on whether he did what is being alleged, that he used the nation's foreign policy apparatus to dig dirt on an opponent, or you're going to support that or not. So you're going to be up for a lot of these senators, the 12, 13 races, which are up, coin flip. You're going to have to take a stand on that, and that's going to potentially change the Senate next fall. He'll probably get out of it. He'll probably be, maybe they censure him or something. But you're going to have all these senators who are now on record.
And Tony?
And then you're going to have all those political consultants that are out there who are going to deal with those senators, not, with the ads that they'll be able to create out of this, with the data mining they'll be able to do to directly go after certain voters in their Senate in their states. That can have an impact. That's the piece. That's one of the things. I think that a lot of these Republican senators right now, they want to keep a Republican president. That's a big part of what this is all about. And I don't know if they're really realizing the impact it's going to have on their own races.
Well, right now what they're doing, Republicans are really focusing on this process by which the Democrats are holding this inquiry behind closed doors. And that's what they've really, we haven't talked about what actually happened with those all the transcripts. They've been avoiding the transcripts, but the process. When is it going to pivot where they're going to actually have to deal with? They're going to have to deal with that transcript.
It becomes public.
Because then you're going to have public hearings.
And what do you think? Are they going to? Because now what I'm hearing is they're going to say that
it's not impeachable.
It's not impeachable.
Exactly. So I heard a great line today. Someone said, "Does he have a war room?" So like when Bill Clinton was impeached, he had a war room.
He didn't, right?
They said he's the war room.
Yeah.
He is it. Yeah, it's one guy alone.
Yeah,
that's the
they
difference
asked
on
him
this
that,
thing.
and he said, "Yeah, he doesn't."
Clinton had some brilliant people around him to give him a hand to try to figure this out. I think one of the best analogies I've heard about this lately too, is Congressman Neal explaining some of this. When they talk about the closed door piece, that's spin. That's just something that gets the average guy out in the middle of Wyoming or Ohio thinking, "Oh, it's terrible. They're doing this behind closed doors." Grand juries are done behind closed doors, and I think it's the analogy that Neal made. It's done quietly, and now it's about to be done publicly. What will the impact of that public piece be?
Yeah, I also think it's going to inflame turnout one way or the other. So let's say he gets off, which we all expect to have happen. People are going to be put on the spot. I think the Democratic base is going to be fired up for next November because essentially he got away with it. I think that's how they're going to feel.
So Democrats have to wait, you're saying?
I think they're going to let it play out. I think they're going to feel they're doing their constitutional duty. I think he ends up getting off. I think some senators may lose their seats because of it. I think Democratic base, everyone's talking about Trump's base, Democratic base, I think, is pitchforks and torches going down to the vote.
It's going to be a flip here.
I think it's possible, yeah.
That's interesting. What do you think?
It's similar. You've got both parties doing what they have to do for party politics. Perhaps not what's best for their own districts or for the country, certainly. But if the Democrats did not do this, the hue and cry against them and their districts would be gigantic.
Yeah, because it took a long time for the Speaker to make this decision to move forward with this impeachment inquiry. It was even weird the way that was kind of went about it, because it was like we're looking into it.
And I think what happened,
so
I think
strange.
they felt they had a smoking gun.
They tiptoed through this.
But I think that at one point they had the smoking gun. In Nixon, the smoking gun was they found that there were hush payments. It kept going and going, and then when they found that there were hush payments, that was the so-called smoking gun. I think they felt they had that with the transfer.
Do you think in this day and age, and I don't know if it's because of social media, because of the way media moves today, because it's so fast, all the information's coming at everybody so quickly. Is there ever going to be a smoking gun in anything anymore?
No, we're desensitized.
Is that
right?
That's what I wonder.
Desensitized.
We're desensitized, and even when there is a smoking gun, you'll have enough people saying, that's not what that is,
you could
that's
say,
something else.
This is a pen.
Somebody planted
this
it.
is not a pen.
Exactly.
And if you support that, Trump was not wrong. We've all said it as consultants. I have told somebody, you could shoot somebody on Main Street and they're still going to vote for it. I have said that in a campaign. So I know a consultant said that to Trump at some point. Because once you're that emotionally committed, it really doesn't matter.
I appreciate you guys doing this.
Sure,
this is great. Doing this online on our digital first platforms at wwlp.com. It's helped me too, because I'm learning more about Massachusetts politics and Western Massachusetts. So I appreciate it. So thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you
both
for
of
having
you.
us.
Tony Signoli, also Paul Robbins here joining us. And we thank you for joining us here on WWLP and the 22 News mobile app. We'll do this more often, of course. From all of us here, have a good night.